Hey, what's going on, everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another Pioneer deck tech. And today, we're going to be talking about the newest version of Selesnya mounts. So, before we hop into the video here, as always, let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about this deck? Is there a specific mount or another creature I should have put in this deck that I did not? Or do you have suggestions for upcoming videos? Just go ahead and let me know in the comment section. So for those who are relatively new to the channel, I actually made a deck like this right when Outlaws of Thunder Junction came out. And whereas the deck was really fun, and it was, I was like, oh hey, it's a new creature type, it's kind of cool. I did play a little bit of, for lack of better terms, I did play a little bit of chaff in that deck. There was like a couple of cards I really wasn't that excited about, but I didn't have really any better options. But with all the new mounts in Aether Drift, honestly, this deck is pretty cool, and it also picked up kind of a new sub-theme a little bit in the deck, which definitely will make sense here in just a moment. But the true inspiration to actually rebuild this deck were these cards right here. 4 copies of Bulwark Ox. I think this is secretly probably the best card in the deck. We're also playing 2 copies of Lagoran Soul of, I'm sorry if I mispronounce this, Alakria? I guess so. And then 4 copies of Cloudspire Captain. So Bulwark Ox is really good in this deck, being able to distribute +1/+1 counters, and then it acts as like a pseudo selfless spirit for the deck. I really do like Bulwark Ox in this deck. Lagoran is also really solid, being able to just put 1/1 counters on other creatures. It's also a cheap flying threat. I really do like this card. Cloudspire Captain is secretly also really good. It's able to saddle any creature in our deck, but it's also just a lord, so it's just a really good card in general. But overall, pretty happy with all these cards here. But let's go and talk about the rest of the deck. So we're playing 34 creatures in total, obviously the ones that we just mentioned, but we're also playing a whole bunch of other ones. So these cards themselves are not mounts, but they're just really good for the deck. Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystic, I like them just because they're able to help accelerate our mana a little bit, but they're also able to saddle, surprisingly, a decent amount of creatures in this deck. So that's kind of why I like them. We're also playing 3 copies of Miriam Herd Whisper. I really love this card. On our turn, it gives our mounts hexproof, which is nice. And then whenever a mount or vehicle you control attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And yeah, this stacks. So if we attack with like 3 or 4 mounts, they each get +1/+1 counters, which is just really good. We're also playing 4 copies of Seraphic Steed. I really love this card. It is a little trickier to saddle. Saddle 4 is definitely not the easiest thing to do, but when it is saddled and it attacks, it's just so good. So definitely huge fan of the Seraphic Steed. I also really love the 4 copies of Congregation Gryff. This card, it's an uncommon, and there's some rares that have some slightly bigger upside, but being able to just have a really big flying lifelinker is just fantastic. So I really do like the Congregation Gryff in this deck. But the other creatures that we're playing in this deck, we're playing 2 copies of Ornery Tumblewag. I do love this because, again, of all the new 1/1 counter shenanigans that are in this deck, like with the Bulwark Ox, and obviously you're playing Miriam, I think that the Ornery Tumblewag is really good. I do love it. Obviously, being able to double the number of +1/+1 counters on target creature can be pretty fantastic. So we're playing 2 copies of that. And then Skyclave Apparition. It's not a mount itself, but it's just really good because it's just an efficient creature that we get to cheat into play with another card that we're going to talk about in just a second here, which actually leads into the super high-tech value spells. You're never going to guess what card that we're playing in this green-white aggro deck. Yeah, it's Collected Company. I mean, come on, it's Collected Company. If we're playing a green aggro deck that's low to the ground, we're going to play Collected Company. I know there's a few different mount cards that are at like 4 and 5 mana, which are of decent value. The only tricky part is those cards are just not better than Collected Company. Collected Company is just insane. Card's going to be good probably in Pioneer for forever just because of how efficient it is. You do live and die by the Collected Company in this deck. If your Cocos are good, you're going to win a lot of games. If your Cocos are bad, it's going to struggle a little bit. That's just kind of how Collected Company rolls. But overall, happy to play 4 Collected Companies in this deck. Alright, so let's go and talk about the lands here. So we're playing 22 lands in this deck. I don't mind playing the extra lands just because we do have some things to do, obviously, with them. So it really doesn't hurt us that much. But anyways, we're playing 4 copies of Razorverge Thicket, 4 copies of Temple Garden, and 4 copies of Branch Loft Pathway as our main dual lands in this deck. We are also playing 2 copies of Cavernous Souls. You're going to name, obviously, Mount with this most of the time. It's also not out of the question to name Human because we do have Miriam in this deck. I feel like there was another card I was going to mention too with Cavern of Souls. But yeah, in general, you're just going to name them out pretty much every time. We're also playing 2 copies of Mutavault because Mutavault is just really good and it fits the creature type theme of this deck. And then we're also playing 2 copies of Lair of the Hydra, 1 Aganjo, 1 Beseiju, and then rounding out our lands, we're playing 1 basic plains and 1 basic forest. And as our spicy basic lands of the day, I know what you're thinking. You were ready for me to just pick the Aether Drift extended art lands and call it a day. No. Since we're getting ready for Tark here, I was like, man, you know what? I'm going to pick a couple of basics from, like, the original Tark here block that I really like. And I really love this plains and I love this forest. It's just, I don't know what it is about it. Like, in the plains, I want to say that's, one of the Jeskai monasteries or whatever that's in the background there. And then the forest, that's just a good looking forest. I mean, just enough said. Like, that's just a cool looking forest art. I wish that more people played these spicy, like, non-fancy lands. Like, it doesn't seem like it happens very often. People either like play really fancy like full arts, or they just do not care what their basics are and they just kind of play what they have. I would love to see more people play these like kind of oddball basic lands that no one really ever talks about. But anyways, I'm going on way too much about these basic lands. Let's go and hop into the rest of the deck tech here. So the next thing we have to talk about is the sideboard for this deck. And I always love to mention that, you know, if you want to change things up or you think a specific card would be a little bit better, go ahead and feel free to change things up. This is just kind of based off of what I am personally running into in my local metagame, as well as what I typically run into on Magic Arena. So, 2 copies of Portable Hole. The card's fantastic. It gets rid of a lot of early plays that, you know, maybe our deck will struggle with a little bit. So definitely a huge fan of the Portable Hole. We're playing 3 copies of Rest in Peace. Rest in Peace is fantastic. There's no reason we wouldn't play it. If we need to hate on the graveyards, Rest in Peace is definitely our best option. We're also playing 2 copies of Deafening Silence. I love bringing this in against all the different Spellslinger decks in the format. This card is definitely it's just a fantastic card. I love playing Deafening Silence. If you're playing white, you should just be playing Deafening Silence in your deck. We're also playing 3 copies of Pick Your Poison. It gets rid of so many good cards. Like, it gets rid of, like, Valgavoths and Atraxas, and it also gets rid of Fable, the Mirror Breakers, Up the Beanstalks, whatever. I really love Pick Your Poison. We're also playing 1 copy of Dromoka's Command. I always love playing, like, a 1 or a 2 of in my green-white decks with this. It just does so much. It can protect us against cards like Wrath of God, or not Wrath of God, Anger of the God specifically. You know, target player sacrificing an enchantment, similar to Pick Your Poison. It's just a nice effect. And then, obviously, being able to just, like, put a 1/1 counter on a creature and also fight is just fantastic. And again, we have that pseudo, you know, 1/1 counter theme in our deck, so definitely a huge fan of the Dromoka's commands. We're also playing 4 copies of Get Lost. Get Lost is just insane. That's all I really have to say. It's just the best white removal spell pretty much that a deck like this can play. So definitely a huge fan of that. So the last thing we have to talk about is the budget options for this deck, which is pretty straightforward, honestly. Just play budget dual lands. That's really all you can do. I mean, I guess you could swap out the Get Lost for, like, Fateful Absence, but overall, this deck is just incredibly cheap to build. I know you see the $246, and initially you're like, oh man, that's kind of pricey. When you take out cards like Cavern of Souls and Beseiju and some of the pricier dual lands, really what you have is a really, really fun, just inexpensive budget deck. And I was able to get the budget list down to $54 US, and again, the only thing I changed were the dual lands, and then I also swapped out the Get Lost. That's it. I didn't change any of the other cards. Heck, I even kept in Collected Company as well as Branch Loft Pathway. So if we wanted to, like, go even crazier and, like, trim the Collected Company and put in, like, a 4-drop mount creature or something like that, this deck could have been even cheaper. So still with a good dual land, actually 2 good dual lands, because we're still playing Razorverge Thicket, with 2 good dual lands in the deck, and with Collected Company, it's still only $54 US to build this deck, which is really cool. But overall, I really love Selesnya mounts. I think that this deck's pretty cool. I definitely want to try some of these in Standard. I feel like there's a deck that has not been found with mounts in general. I think some of these cards are extremely strong. Just, you know, in combination together. I mean, Bulwark Ox is fantastic. I mean, Miriam's fantastic. Like, the Ornery Tumblewag is a sweet card. I don't know. I think there's definitely a deck here in Standard, so I definitely want to try this out in Standard, but as of right now in Pioneer, play with Collected Company in this deck is just a really, really fun green-white aggro deck. Alright, so that takes us to the end of the video here. Thanks so much for watching. The deck lists are in the description below if you'd like to check them out for yourself. Huge shout out to our channel members, Ralph, Matt, Arcadius, Ray, Gary, Sarwanoki, Night Red 3, and Michael D, who is our premium channel member. If you were interested in being a channel member, it starts at $1 US a month, and you get access to the exclusive Commander Crane Discord, as well as other features here on the channel. So, I'm Commander Crane. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in the next one.